Hello and welcome to Your Average Bear Gaming. I am George. Today, I'm going to give these another shot. Contrast paints. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know I have a love-hate relationship with these guys. They offer a lot of promise, and they do a pretty good job at what they're designed to do. My problem with them is that I don't like the way they look. The colors are just candy. I was ready to give up on them, but I've seen examples of people doing incredible things with contrast paints, and I don't want to be left behind. Let's give these another look, shall we? So my previous attempts at using contrast paints, I wasn't satisfied with the results, and I quickly repainted the models, stripped them clean, and tried again with normal acrylic paints. And yeah, I was going to give it a rest there. I was just going to, I don't know, get rid of these, or I don't know, store them somewhere until they rotted away. But I recently saw a video where Jay of Eons of Battle, fame, right? He's a small YouTuber, but one of my favorites. He painted, I think they were assassins, and they looked amazing. He did just a wonderful job, and his models that were painted with contrast paint did not look like they were painted with contrast paints. They looked pretty amazing. After a little chat with him, well, not one-on-one, but through one of his streaming sessions, he answers a lot of questions from his loyal viewers, like me. And he gave me a couple of tips to try. So, try I will. So you might be wondering, what are the unfortunate models that are going to be subjected to my clumsy attempts at contrast painting? Oh, sorry, not contrast painting, speed painting. Well, it's these guys. These are some Aeldar Warlocks I bought a few months back when the Aeldar released some new stuff. Well, Games Workshop released some new stuff for the Aeldar. These Warlocks were one of the new boxes, and I've had them laying around for a little bit, waiting for something cool to do with them. This guy, if he doesn't look familiar, he is a metal Warlock from 2nd edition. He's about 20 years old, and he kind of looks it. But he was in my collection, and he wasn't doing anything. He was poorly painted, so I decided to give it a shot. I had lost that shuriken pistol. It had kind of fallen off of his hand, so I replaced it with a plastic one from the kit that these came in. I even added a little bit of height to the base so that he didn't look quite as stumpy next to his Warlock buddies. They were making fun of him incessantly. It was pretty sad to see. So let's talk about the plan. I've got these two bottles of speed paint from Army Painter, Zealot Yellow and Highlord Blue, and I'm going to use these two as the primary colors for my little Warlock friends. As you can see, I've given them a zenithal highlight, giving them the maximum opportunity to look cool. Alright, base coat glazing. Well, in this case, it's mostly not base coat glazing because I didn't actually glaze. I used speed paints. The primary color that I used is this guy, Highlord Blue by Army Painter. It's from the speed paint line. And so that went on all the robes, kind of the main part of the armor. The secondary color was Zealot Yellow. This went on kind of the armor plates, basically. The boots, the helmet, that sort of thing. And the final speed paint that I used was Blood Red. This is an accent color that I used for, there's like a scarf or a sash that's kind of hanging off the side of the model that looks really cool. And so I thought I'd pick it out and make it look a little bit different. The speed paints went on all right. A little splotchy, but that's technique more than the product. And the only other color I used for the base coat, this was a glaze, was uniform gray. I added this to the weapons and the hair because these weapons and the hair will be white, but I want to establish the shadows, and to do that I went a step darker than the color it's going to ultimately be. I added the same color to the base, a little bit of this stuff, dark stone. It's the darkest brown that I've got. That went on any decorative rocks that are on the base. That should do the trick for base coating. Here are my Warlocks. They have been base coated, and they don't look half bad. They're still a little candy, a little saturated, but it's not as bad as I thought. I could probably live with this, but thankfully I'm not going to leave it there. I'm going to do some stuff to embellish just to make this look a little more painted, less speed painted. But for the first pass, it ain't half bad. You will notice though that I didn't use speed paints for all of this. Specifically, you'll notice there's some gray here on the hair, on the weapons. So that is not speed paint. I don't have that many speed paint colors. I didn't get the big box. I just got the kind of the initial sample pack, the 10. So I didn't include this color, and that's fine because I don't want to use speed paints for everything. I just want to use speed paints to kind of get used to them, but also bring some different kinds of color to my models, and I think that's going to work out here. So you'll see I use a speed paint yellow, speed paint blue, speed paint red, and speed paint brown. They look pretty good. I'm actually really happy with the brown, just like that. Even if I don't touch it again, it's pretty neat. I like that. And I did use some acrylics for the base. Just use some uniform gray all over the base, dark stone for the stones. And it looks like I forgot this Warlock's foot. But they all look roughly the same. So it wasn't so bad. It was relatively quick. Here is my metal model. Doesn't look half bad either, although it is clear that he's an older model. The details are softer. It doesn't look as good, but you know, he for the most part looks like he belongs with this group of Warlocks. So, having completed this step, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is washing. Washing. This step is also a little different from my usual in that I don't have a ton of washing to do. Since I use speed paints for the bulk of the model, I don't have to do any washing. In fact, if I try, not much is going to happen. That's kind of how the speed paints are designed. I've tried it before, it didn't really do anything for me, so I'm going to skip that step, except for those parts of the model that were base coated with acrylics, not speed paints. And so the first part of those is going to be the hair, for which I used Nuln oil. This is going to give me shadows in the deepest part of the hair, kind of to establish that they're in shadow, and it'll help me contrast with the midtones that are the gray, and then the highlights that I'll eventually put on, which are the white. The other wash that I used is red tone. This is from Army Painter. It leaves a very nice red, kind of a transparent film over the pieces that I put on, and I'm going to put it on the weapons, the weapon heads, the stuff that's enchanted. The idea is to give this the allure of it being an enchanted, magical, psychic weapon. The witch blades, the witch spears, that sort of thing, they're going to get some of this red stuff. The shafts of the weapons and the pistols are not going to get that same treatment because they're not that type of weapon. They're going to get good old Nuln Oil. And that should help me kind of distinguish the different types of white on this model. It's going to look a little weird, but we'll fix it, not in post, we'll fix it in the next step. So now that the washing is done, let's take stock of what we've got. So here's what our model looks like once the base coat is added and the washes are added, where they're gonna go, right? And so far it's kind of I don't know. It looks fine, but it still looks weird to me, a little candy-ish. But we're gonna see if we can't follow Jay's advice from Eons of Battle and make this look a little better. And the first step to that, I think, is gonna be to do some dry brushing. So the dry brushing is done, so I thought it would be a good time to take stock of what we've accomplished, and it looks okay. I'm not really, I know there's plenty of difference here in the blue. The yellow, I'm not so sure about. It still looks kind of candy-ish. And for a comparison, I think it might be good to show you this guy. This guy has not been dry brushed at all. And so you can see the dry brush is a pretty effective way of pushing up the highlights, but I don't think I've been successful in doing so in the yellow spots. The yellow looks fairly similar. The white of the weapons is a lot more subtle than I'd like. They look like dirty gray weapons, not white weapons. So I clearly have a ways to go in learning how to paint white. So yeah, there's that. But all in all, I'm happy with the blue. There's plenty of highlights. In fact, there's more highlights than I usually do on my models, and I kind of like the way that looks. So I don't know, maybe the verdict is out. So I'm going to finish dry brushing with this guy, and then I'll move on to the next phase. Okay, let's talk dry brushing. In this case, I use dry brushing to introduce some highlights onto the kind of the base coat that was already there. So over the blue speed paint, I added a dry brush of Electric Blue from Army Painter. It's a nice light blue that kind of blends in nicely with the blue underneath. So I took out a texture palette. I added some on that texture palette, and I took a dry brush and just kind of gave it a light brushing on those elevated surfaces, so kind of the front part of the leg, the ridges on the cape, that sort of thing, and it left an interesting pattern. It kind of gave it some texture, and I want to say I meant to do it, but I really didn't. I still have some challenges with how dry my dry brushes are, and so sometimes they leave a little streak, but sometimes that little streak kind of looks interesting, so I have options of trying to cover it up and redoing it, or leaving it there. And in this case, I think I left it there. I thought it looked kind of neat in some cases. Other cases, less so, but practice makes better. For the yellow parts, so the helmet, shoulder pads, etc., I used Uriel Yellow from Citadel Color. This color is kind of my usual highlight color for my Aeldar. It's kind of what I want the final color to look like. I've used other recipes for yellow in other Aeldar projects, and those look fine too, but here I went with this just to kind of make the yellow color a bit brighter, but also, weirdly enough, less transparent. And it worked okay, although I did find that the dry brush yellow interacted weirdly with the speed paint yellow that was underneath. In some cases, it kind of peeled off the yellow that was underneath. Other times, it kind of turned grainy and weird. Yeah, so I need more work with this technique, and certainly where speed paints are concerned. But you know, they did become less opaque, so there's that for a victory. Let's talk details. There was a decent amount of details that I had to pick out on this model, and so I went for the kind of the obvious things like the leather strap, a leather belt, and for that I used a little bit of leather brown. Seemed like the obvious choice, right? I spent some time doing some overbrushing on the kind of the metal plate that the Warlocks have on their chest. I used some bright metallic silver for that. It's an Army Painter acrylic, and so I just kind of very carefully with the edge of the brush just kind of touched it. It's, you know, kind of like a dry brush, but not quite a dry brush because there's a decent amount of paint on the brush itself. But you know, if you just kind of carefully run the edge of your brush, you can usually get a decent result off of that. I did a lot of the other obvious stuff, like I filled in the gem colors. I did a little undercoat of white. Did a circle around with the metallic silver. Gave it the actual color that I went with, so I did like a couple were purple, a couple were green. I even added a few orange gems on the helmet. I did something similar with the eyes in the helmet. I went with the bright oranges there just to make them a little different from my other Aeldar. I'm not quite sure I like the way that looks with the, you know, the yellow helmet and then the silver faceplate, but it looks okay. You know, I use a lot of red for that same purpose, and I don't know if I want to do that all the time. I kind of do want to vary them a little bit, so that seemed to work. I will say I ended up repainting my weapons. I just wasn't digging that red wash underneath the white dry brush. It really wasn't working for me. So I just went in with some white I went in with some gray. It was uniform gray, kind of a medium gray acrylic over the weapons, and then I dry brushed white over that, and they look okay. But I still have a ways to go with painting white weapons. So I finished these Warlocks, and they're not horrible. They're certainly better than my last attempt at using speed paints. It was just a test. I didn't paint the whole model, I don't think, but here's one of these guys. Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look great, but you know, it's fine. The blue color isn't so bad. It pools kind of weird. There's some reddish tints to it, I think, in some places, but when you do a little bit of extra dry brushing, a little extra stuff on it, it looks pretty decent. Yeah, the yellow I'm less enthused with. The dry brush didn't really take. I did a little bit of glazing on top of it just to kind of cover up some of the stuff. It doesn't look good. In fact, I'll show you kind of what it looks like a little bit more close up. You'll notice that weird brown thing right above the visor. It's like, feels like the paint got scraped off when I dry brushed it with the yellow. So I don't know if that's part of the speed paint formula or what, but I don't like the way it looked. I think I would have been better off just using normal acrylics there. You kind of see it with this guy too. You'll see that thing, like his brow, there's like kind of speckling. I don't know what that is. But, you know, I tried again, and I just... the red looks okay. I had to go back and repaint it because I got a bunch of paint on it from other places. My Metal Mini looks grainy and gross. I don't know if I could have done a better job 20 years ago, but it's just kind of bad. But it is what it is, whatevs. So after painting these guys and getting kind of mediocre results, but not as bad as my previous results. So I guess I've gotten a little bit better. I guess it does help if you do additional layers on top of the speed paints. But I guess that's kind of my problem with speed paints, is that you kind of do need stuff on top of it in order for it to look good. Otherwise, the colors are really candy and extra weirdly bright, but kind of transparent too. Like, I know that's the whole point, is that they're transparent. They just don't look good to me, at least. And I feel like I could achieve better results with acrylics, and maybe that's because I've been painting with acrylics for 2 years, and I just haven't given these enough of a shot. But I feel like I can do a lot more different colors with acrylics than I can do with these speed paints, and maybe you can mix them a bit. I don't know. The thing is, if you had to do extra dry brushing on top of it to make it look decent, then why are you using speed paints? Because you have to do the same thing with acrylics. And if you use acrylics, you don't get that weird peeling. And I did get that. Like, I know it's not supposed to be a big deal, but on these 3 models, it happened to me on 2 of them. Part of it on the yellow helmet as I dry brushed. There was a bit of a scraping that you saw. The other part was on the red scarf. I had to go back and cover it up, so covered it up with white or mummy robes paint, kind of an off-white. And the red from underneath it kept bleeding into the white. So I ended up having to give it like 4 coats, and then I went back once it was decently white. I gave it some Nuln oil to give it some shadows, and then once that dried, I gave it some more speed paint of the red, and it finally looked decent. But there was that bleed through effect. So I think if you end up having to embellish them much like you would acrylics, then I don't see the advantage. Maybe the advantage is that if you don't do anything at all, if you don't do any shadows, if you don't do any highlights, and you just use the speed paints, it'll look better than if you just use the acrylics. And with acrylics, it's really easy to not thin your paints enough, so you end up with lumpy looking models. So maybe if you're really, really beginner, like if you're just fresh out of, you're fresh into your new first models and you don't know anything about painting, maybe speed paints are the way to go. But if you've already worked with acrylics, it seems like a step backwards. Although, if you were working with acrylics for a while and you haven't found much success, maybe taking a step back to speed paints, maybe it's not a bad deal. I guess for me, my painting skills are advanced enough that maybe I'm a bit beyond the basic use case for speed paints, but I'm not quite advanced enough to use speed paints like another kind of color. I know Jay from EOB does phenomenal work with speed paints, and he's got a ton of experience and probably also some talent. Like he puts in a lot of work, but there's probably something inherently better than me. Or he's got something inherently better than me as well. Like there's the amount of skill you can get by work, and there's just like a baseline that you get. I don't know, you're born with it, or maybe he has a steady hand, better feel for color. I don't know what it is, but experience, practice, plus innate ability. Like I think in both those cases, Jay is demonstrably better than me, and that's I'm fine. Like if I'm comparing myself against a professional painter, then I guess I'm doing all right. But I'm clearly way below his skill level, and so he's able to make speed paints do things for him that I just I just can't even imagine how to make that happen. So, that's in spite of him telling me what he did. So, I don't know, man. I think maybe some select colors and very select use cases, speed paints are the way to go. I think I did find the one place where speed paints might be the way to go. You'll notice all the gems that these Warlocks have. I bet you, so for each of these gemstones, I have to undercoat with white, then I have to add the color layer, and then I have to do the little dot for the reflection, and then I have to go back and add the wash to make them look kind of translucent. I bet you those speed paints leave a wonderful candy-looking color, and it would make for awesome gems. Maybe also like those eye holes. Maybe that's where you use speed paints to best effect. It seems like a very specific use case, but no, it is what it is, right? Maybe that's the way to go. And maybe I'll give those a shot with my next Aeldar kit. You know, like light up lights. I think that might be the best place to use these. And I think that's enough for experimenting for me for one project. I've made some progress with speed paints, but so far they're still just not for me. But I'm not going to paint over these. I'm going to keep these around. I was thinking about going back and touching them up, like redoing them with the yellow. I'm just going to leave them as they are because I want to keep this as an example of my work with speed paints. Maybe sometime in the future I will do better with them than now, and I'll be able to look back and go, ha ha ha, I was such a dummy. But I hope you're having better luck with speed paints than I have. And if you've had success with them, let me know in the comments. It'd be kind of cool to hear your story. At any rate, if you have them, keep experimenting with them until you figure them out or chuck them in the trash. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. This has been your Average Bear Gaming. Have a wonderful afternoon. Be nice to yourselves and each other. Peace.